Silent sacrifice. James falls to protect the woman he loves. The wind that evening was colder than usual, not because of the approaching storm, but because James knew deep in his soul that something was about to break. He stood at the edge of the city bridge, staring at the distant horizon. Behind him, Tu Diep waited, wrapped in her thin coat, unaware of the danger lurking in the shadows. Her eyes sparkled in the fading sunset, full of love and trust. And that was what tore James apart the most. He knew the truth. He had received the call just hours earlier. You show up alone, James, or she disappears forever. It wasn't the first threat, but it was the final one. John had returned, colder, darker, and backed by a force James couldn't yet name. But this time, he wasn't here for money or power. He was here for revenge. As Tu Diep laughed beside him, brushing her hair from her face, James memorized everything about her. The curve of her lips, the warmth in her voice, the way she believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. He smiled back, though his heart was screaming. "I'm going to get some tea," he said gently. "Wait for me by the car, okay?" Tu Diep nodded, not suspecting a thing. "Don't be long." She would never know those were the last words he would say to her. James didn't go for tea. Instead, he walked straight into the trap, a warehouse at the docks. Empty, echoing, soaked in the scent of oil and danger. John stood in the middle, eyes burning with fury. Behind him, masked men waited. "I knew you'd come alone," John sneered. "You always were the hero." James didn't speak. He had no time for anger or fear. Only one goal remained. "Keep her safe, let her go," he said calmly. "You've already won." But John shook his head. "No, James, I don't want her dead. I want her to live in pain, to watch you fall, to carry your loss like a curse." A shot rang out. James fell, but not before throwing himself in front of the sniper's aim, a final move only he could make. The bullet tore through him. Pain exploded in his chest, but oddly, it didn't hurt the way he expected. It was cold, like drowning. As he collapsed to the ground, all he could see was her smile in the sunset. Tu Diep. He had saved her. That was all that mattered. She found him minutes later. She had felt something, a fear, a pull, and ran. When she saw him lying there, bleeding but still breathing, she screamed his name so loud it tore the night. "James, no, no, please, stay with me, you promised." He looked at her, blood on his lips, but eyes still gentle. "I told you," he whispered, "I'd protect you, always." Then a silence. Epilogue. James survived. Barely. He was in a coma for weeks. Tu Diep never left his side. She read to him, played their favorite songs, held his hand through the long nights. When he finally opened his eyes, her tears spilled freely. "You came back to me," she whispered. James smiled faintly. "I never left." Because love, real love, is not just felt in the easy moments. It's proven in sacrifice, in silence, in the darkest hours, when no one is watching. James fell not because he was weak. He fell because he was strong enough to stand in front of the bullet meant for the woman he loved. And in doing so, he didn't lose. He became her hero forever. The road back, the hospital walls were too white, too quiet, too sterile for a man who had once commanded boardrooms, led teams, and stood tall beneath storms of corporate betrayal. James lay in the hospital bed, pale and unmoving, machines beeping beside him, the only proof he hadn't yet let go. Tu Diep sat beside him every day. Sometimes she spoke softly, reading his favorite books. Sometimes she cried silently, clutching his hand like it was the only anchor she had left. Other times, she simply stared, remembering the moment he fell. That moment haunted her. It wasn't just the blood. It wasn't the gunshot. It was the way he looked at her, calm, certain, with so much love, right before he collapsed, as if he knew he was giving everything away and had no regrets. The awakening. Weeks passed. Then, one rainy morning, as Tu Diep sat with her head resting on the side of his bed, she felt a soft squeeze on her fingers. Her eyes flew open. "James," she whispered. His eyelids fluttered, slowly, like a curtain lifting after a long night. Then, a whisper, dry and cracked, "Still here." Tu Diep burst into tears, laughing through her sobs. "You idiot," she whispered, cupping his face. "You really scared me." He gave her the faintest smile. "I told you, I never leave what I love." The storm isn't over. Though James was alive, the war was far from won. John had vanished, and the mysterious figure backing him, the ghost James suspected from the shadows of his family's past, remained hidden. Worse, James's company was under attack. The board was fracturing. Their timber supplier had pulled out. Rumors of bankruptcy spread like wildfire. Tu Diep watched James struggle to sit up in his hospital bed, already sketching out plans, calling in favors and whispering to Toon, his loyal assistant, from behind closed doors. "You should be resting," she told him, exasperated. James smiled, weak but determined. "Rest comes after you're safe, after everything is rebuilt." Tu Diep looked at him in awe. His body was broken, but his spirit, unshakable. A new mission. Days later, James made a choice that shocked everyone. He resigned as CEO. He handed over control temporarily to his younger brother, not out of defeat, but as a strategic retreat. "I need to fight this war another way," he said, from the outside. Tu Diep didn't understand at first, but that night, as she sat with him by the window overlooking the city, he explained. "There's someone bigger than John," he said. "Someone from the past. Someone who wants my family to fall." Tu Diep frowned. "Why not go to the police?" "Because this isn't just about crime. It's about legacy, justice, secrets buried beneath decades of silence." He looked at her gently. "I need to go where they don't expect me." To be continued. As James began his secret investigation, meeting with retired lawyers, tracking shadowy offshore accounts, following whispers of land disputes and hidden enemies, Tu Diep stayed close. But danger followed them like a ghost. One night, a package arrived at her door, no return address. Inside, a single photo, James, bleeding, a red X slashed across his face, and a note, "Next time, we won't miss." Tu Diep's hands trembled. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. The night was heavy with silence. James stood in the garden behind Tu Diep's small countryside home, breathing in the cool air, his hand brushing over the scar beneath his shirt, the place where the bullet had nearly taken his life. It still ached, not from pain, but from memory. Inside, Tu Diep stirred soup over the stove. She hadn't smiled much lately, not the way she used to. The photo, the threat, it had changed everything. Still, she never left his side. Even when James insisted she return to her normal life, she only shook her head. "My normal is you." The first clue. Days later, Toon arrived with a brown leather folder. "Boss," he said, handing it to James. "We traced the shell company that pulled investment from the hydroelectric dam." James flipped it open. Bank transfers, a fake director, a shell firm based in Bangkok. At the end of the report, a name, Lathan Duong. James froze. Tu Diep noticed. "Who is he?" James clenched his jaw. "My father's former business partner, presumed dead 20 years ago." Ghosts return. That night, James sat alone, digging through an old chest in his family's villa. Dust clung to forgotten documents. One photograph fell to the floor. It showed two men shaking hands. In front of a field, his father and a younger man with sharp eyes and a half-smile. Lathan Duong, in the corner of the photo, scribbled in fading ink, "Land for promise, power for silence." James stared at it for a long time. Something inside him twisted. His family hadn't just taken land. They had silenced someone for it, ruined someone, and now the past was collecting its debt. A second betrayal. Tu Diep was quieter these days, not distant, just watchful. One morning, she received a message on her old phone. "Meet me at the abandoned factory, alone. Come, or James dies." No name, but she knew the voice behind those words. John. She didn't tell James, She couldn't risk him getting hurt again. The trap. At midnight, Tu Diep arrived at the broken-down factory on the edge of town. John stood in the shadows, his eyes cold, arms crossed. "You came," he said. "I always keep my promises," Tu Diep replied. Her voice didn't shake, but her hands did. John stepped closer. "I don't want to hurt you, but I need you. If you work for me, feed me James's plans, he'll live. You both will." Tu Diep swallowed. "And if I don't?" John smiled darkly. "Then I'll finish what I started." The hidden earpiece. What John didn't know, James was listening. Tu Diep had planted a hidden mic in her necklace. It was her idea. She had insisted. Back in a black van parked nearby, James sat pale, weak from his injuries, headphones on. Tune beside him. "She's risking everything," Tune muttered. James's eyes were fixed on the monitor. "She's stronger than I ever knew." Just as John reached out to grab Tu Diep's arm, a floodlight exploded through the factory windows. Police stormed in. John tried to run, but James, limping but unshaken, stepped in front of him. John stopped dead in his tracks. "You should have killed me when you had the chance," James said quietly. John's eyes burned with rage. "This isn't over." Behind him, a shadow watched from the rooftops. Lathan Duong, the real mastermind, had just entered the game. In the midst of chaos, it is often the quietest acts that echo the loudest. James did not need grand speeches to prove his love for Tu Diep. He did not shout to the world that he was fighting for justice. Instead, he chose to endure pain in silence, to bleed behind closed doors, and to protect the woman he loved, even if it meant risking everything. True love is not loud. It is steady, brave, willing to lose everything just to see the one you love safe. And Tu Diep, though gentle, showed that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through trembling hands and a heart that refuses to abandon someone in their darkest hour. From their story, we learn loyalty is not tested in good times, but in storms. Strength is not in how much you can control, but in how much you're willing to protect without expecting anything in return. And sometimes, the most heroic thing you can do is simply stay. Let us be reminded, the truest strength lies not in power or revenge, but in love that refuses to give up. The silent heroes among us, in every story of sacrifice, there lies a truth we often forget. Not all heroes wear armor. Some wear the weight of love on their shoulders. Some bleed quietly, away from the spotlight. James never asked for praise. He didn't want Tu Diep to know the extent of what he endured for her, because his love was never about recognition. It was about protection, about giving without taking. And that is what true sacrifice looks like. We live in a world that often values loud achievements over silent loyalty. But it is in the quiet moments when no one is watching that real character is revealed. Tu Diep, too, taught us something powerful. When she chose to stand beside James despite the danger, despite the lies, despite the fear, she became a force of unwavering love. Not perfect, not fearless, but real. Human. Love, in its purest form, is not found in grand gestures, but in the choice to stay, to believe, to fight together, again and again.